Hey everyone, this is Freelance, and in this video I'll show you how to model a 3D character from start to finish. So in the next video we will see how to texture it. This is just a modeling process. Many people asked in the comments for a slower video and much more explained, so I just sped up the parts where there's nothing technical. So let's get started. So I generally start in ZBRUSH for the shapes, but you can do it in Maya or Blender. It's really the workflow that's important. It's like you prefer. I always begin with primitive shapes, for instance here a sphere for the head. I make sure to Z-remesh it a couple of times to reduce the poly count, and I Z-remesh it with symmetry activated so the topology will be symmetrical. These are Z-spheres. They are very handy sometimes, but I won't explain now because I eventually used another technique that was more suited for all the tail shape. As you can see, you can place many spheres where you like and then turn it into polygons, but it's hard to obtain a perfect curved shape. So as you can see, you can notice the kind of stepping that came from the Z-spheres, and that's very hard to erase. So that's why I prefer to use a cylinder and use a very handy deformer. You can access to multiple deformers when you're on the gizmo mode of the object, and just click on the little settings icon. Here, for example, I use the bend curve tool. There are many handles, but the most important is the axis handle to define the axis of your dots, and then the last handle in orange is the one that will determine how many control dots you will have in your object. So as you can see, you can then achieve a very smooth result and even scale the parts you want. You can also change the dots count when you want, so it's really super handy to make bendy kind of stuff. Okay, so now I go on with the head and start to give it more shape. It's a good habit to quickly place the shapes of the mouth, nose and eyes depending on the model, because these parts are the most important in the head, because if there's something wrong with them, people will notice it directly. Even if they don't know anything about 3D, the human eye notices very easily when something is off. So it's super important to work on very low poly shapes at first, because what matters most at the beginning are the primary shapes. You want them to be smooth and clean. And while in ZBrush it's very easy to go quickly into the details, you just subdivide it a couple of times and then you sculpt all these nice details that you think about. But it can be really dangerous because you might have super cool details and then you zoom out and your primary shapes aren't good. So at the beginning, just keep your object at the lowest subdivision possible. If you want to have something symmetrical like the eye, place your eye first and then just go to Z plugin, subtool master and hit mirror. You can then choose if you want it in the same subtool or not. So for instance, I keep it in the same subtool, because as you can see, if you do this, the pivot point stays on the first object. And if you're in symmetry mode, so X to activate it, you can move it with the gizmo and then the other side will move accordingly. So that's super handy. So here again I use the bend curve tool to create the arm shape I want. Remember that it may be good to bend the arm a little bit. It's also for the legs, because if you want them to be animated or rigged, then it's better to have already a kind of direction, because the rigger will place bones, and those bones for arms never needs to be straight. They always need already to have a kind of direction. So it's important to do this to help the rigger. Now for the leg, I decided to create two primitives and then merge them together. You need to ask yourself what primitives can easily make this shape. For example, for the leg, there are two main shapes. The upper leg is mainly a sort of egg shape, and then the lower part is just a cylinder that goes thinner towards the end. So just create these two shapes and you can then merge them together later on. So remember, stay clean, stay simple, and then you will have a nice smooth result, especially for cartoon characters. To create the foot like on the concept, I just took a sphere and with a big flatten brush, I flattened one side. I then scaled it and rotated it as I wanted, and then we have this nice smooth foot shape. the mouth I used the damp standard brush, which has this nice slash effect. And I then wanted to modify the upper part of the mouth, so I just masked everything on the lower side, and then I could move the upper side like I wanted. So don't forget that you can mask things out, it's very useful. Once you're satisfied with your primary shapes and you know nothing major will change, you can merge everything but the eyes. Just make sure your objects are below the other ones, because ZBRUSH takes the one below to merge with, and just hit merge down a couple of times. Well, this will just put them in the same object, they are not really merged. So to do that, go to Dynamesh and hit it. This will weld everything together. You just need to play with the resolution to keep enough details. You can then smooth out the contact zones to make them less sharp. So once the base sculpt is done, it's time to send it to Maya to do the retopology. Because if you want to animate it later on, then the topology of the mesh needs to be clean, which it isn't right now. But as you can see, it has 1.5 million polygons, which can be a bit too much for Maya to handle. So to reduce that, go to Z plugin, Decimation Master, and hit pre-process everything. Basically, this will analyze your meshes, and once done, you can hit Decimation Current. And this will reduce the polygon of your object by the percentage you gave. So this will fully triangulate your mesh, but it will keep more resolution where it's needed. So flat parts with less details will have less polygons, so that's super handy to reduce polygon. We just want 3D object in Maya, so we don't care. We just care about the topology that we will later on do on top of this mesh. So just export it and let's start in Maya. So import it in Maya, and the first thing to do is set it on the right scale. So I group everything together. And then a good scale value in Maya is to take 1 square as 10 cm. I like to go into the content browser, you can find it in the Sculpting tab, and then take a human body. Because if you scale the human body by 0.1, you would then have the good scale reference. The idea now is to create polygons on top of the high poly model, to have a clean and animatable mesh. So to do this, click on your model, make it live by clicking on the magnet icon above, and now you can activate the quad draw tool. So this is a super useful tool that allows you to create points by just clicking on the surface, and once you have 4, you can just hit Ctrl click to create the polygon. And every polygon that you create or move will stay on the surface of the mesh that you set live. So the most important thing for clean mesh and adapted for animation are 4-sided polygons everywhere. So there should be no triangles or n-gones. So n-gones are polygons with more than 4 sides. And you need loops on some parts. So loops are important for the good flow of your topology. Basically, you would want a loop for every important shape you need to guide with the topology. For example, for the eye, don't just draw a grid on top of it. You need to make a smooth loop around it to accompany its shape. Not only will this help to create the shapes you want with a few polygons, but it will also be much easier to rig later on or animate it. That's why you would want loops around the eyes, on the nose, on the mouth, in my case on the eyebrows to accompany the shape of it, on the arms, fingers, etc. A nice rule is to have 3 edge loops around every important part. So for the mouth I have 3, it's good to have those on the eyes as well. And this is necessary if you want to deform these parts. Don't overdo it, however. Don't add more topology if it's not needed. good technique that I use is to create loops on the needed parts, like on the eyes, the mouth, the neck, and then just fill the gap with polygons to connect them. I also just make one side, and then in the end I'll mirror it. For this to work properly, however, and also for the wigging and the animation process, you need to have an edge that runs through the middle of your whole object and one poly loop on both sides. For the arm, it's best to stay with equal edge loop numbers, like 8, 12, 16. I, for example, like to start by making 4 polygons, so that is not enough, obviously, but you create 4 for north, south, east and west, and I then add one edge in the middle of each one, so I end up with 8. This isn't enough, but for now let's keep it this way, because it's best to work on low topology and later on subdivided ones or 2 if needed. A good value of edge number around legs or arms is 16. You can have more if it's justified, but that's why I made 8, because when I will subdivide it later on, it will end up with 16. Oh, and sometimes you may see me smooth everything out, so that's super handy on the quad draw tool. Just hold down Shift and click on the zones you want to smooth out. It will try to make the topology clean and smooth, but don't overdo it, because it can change your topology too much. The most efficient way to use it is by activating the soft mode by clicking B, and then when you smooth everything out, it will have a nice follow. So same thing here on the legs. I try to have 8 edges around the leg, so I like to make one loop at the beginning and one at the end, and I then just connect everything. You need to be aware to connect the white polygon to the other, however. And it's perfectly normal that the polygons are more close to each other on the inner side than on the outer side, because you want the same topology, but naturally, if your leg is bent or kind of closed, then the polygons on the inner side and near the folds will be much more tight. Also, think of adding more loops on the parts where your body part will bend. So for the arms and legs, you need 3 loops on the elbow and knee, 1 in the middle and 1 on both sides. So this is the minimum required if you want it to bend correctly. Remember, make a loop around the important shapes. So for the foot, I made a loop to go around the whole foot. You can see that I added an edge loop for the elbow on the back side of the arm. And a little trick to create an elbow shape in the topology is to take 4 sides of the elbow extrude it inwards or do the shape with the multi-cut tool, is the same. This won't add more polyloops or anything, and once you smooth it out a little bit, you will see it creates this nice wound shape to accompany the shape of the elbow. You might want to do this in order to preserve the elbow shape if your arm will bend. Here's a little trick if you see that you won't have enough polygons on one side in order to connect everything, so it's called a fish. With the multi-cut tool, start from a point and go to one side by cutting towards the top, then do the same thing on the exact other side. You then delete the middle edge from your starting point, and it will create a polygon with 4 sides. So this technique divides one edge into 3. I do this 3 times to have the topology count I want. However, make sure to do this on parts that won't hinder. You don't want to do this near any important parts, such as the eyes or mouth, for example, because the topology needs to stay clean around these parts. So that's why I created it a bit around the neck, so it won't hinder with the rest of the face. Keep in mind that everything needs to be closed in the mesh. On the one hand because it's cleaner, and on the other hand because if you apply SSS, so subsurface scattering, the mesh needs to be closed or it won't always behave well. So you might have noticed that I used the quad draw tool without the other mesh to be live. So the quad draw tool can also be used without it. If you move or smooth things out, it will just try to stick to your original surface. So like the eye, the mouth needs to be closed as well. My character won't ever open its mouth, so I don't do it correctly. But if you want a mouth that will open and will be animated, make it as big as a real mouth, because you want the teeth to be in there and the tongue and so. So now let's make the hand, because I didn't do it in ZBrush. I think it's faster and you have a nicer result when you do it directly with topology. So for the hand I like to start with a cube. I make it flat and already a bit in the shape of a hand without the fingers. I then create edges like this with the connect tool, and I made 7 edges so that I have 8 polygons. So 8 polygons if you had 4 fingers, 10 if you had 5. I added 1 edge in the middle with the multi-cut tool, and then do the same thing as I did for the elbow in order to create that round shape. In a hole, if you select one vertex and then double click on the next one, it will select the whole circle. And with these vertexes selected, I click on the circleize option and this will create a perfect circle. You might just have to scale it and rotate it. I like to use 1/2 of a smooth cube for the fingers, because it will have exactly 8 edges on its loop. I create 3 edge loops on the parts where it will bend, because remember that's important, and I use the same technique as on the elbow to emphasize the shape of each phalanx. To connect the fingers onto the hand, first duplicate them, then place them by setting the pivot point on the top vertex, so hit D to edit the pivot point and hold down V to snap it on the vertex. Then simply rotate them slightly like real fingers, and then you can select the fingers and the hand and hit combine. To connect these vertexes, just select the 2 that belong together and hit the merge vertex icon. After that you can just hit G from now on to repeat the last action. It will avoid you from always clicking on the icon. So G is a nice shortcut, it just repeats your last action. So I used the fish technique, the same technique I used on the neck, to create 2 more edge loops around the middle loop between the fingers. So this will help it deform better, because otherwise it will lack topology if you spread out your fingers or if you want to move them. Once finished with your topology, you can then smooth the topology out with the quad draw option or with this one. So this is in the curve tab. Double click on the icon with the brush, and then you will have several brushes to choose from. One is to smooth out the topology, but your brush might be insanely big if you use it the first time, so just hold B and drag down to make the size smaller. If you look at your hand, you can see it's slightly bent on one axis. So to do this, go to Deform, go to Nonlinear and hit Bend. You will need to rotate the bend tool on the right axis, and then you can choose the bend percentage. And finally, to apply it, just delete the history of your mesh. I lack topology here to connect the arm with the hand, so I created 2 fishes, again not too close to the part where the wrist will bend. Now it's time to mirror it, because one side is good, and if your middle edge is on the exact middle of the scene, then it will mirror without problem. So to make good looking eyes, you need to have the right technique. Roughly spoken, you need to make the eye as it is in real life. So I take a sphere, I rotate it, I then duplicate it slightly and make it bigger. So this will be the cornea of the eye. So the cornea will have a glass shader on it, as it is transparent. It is slightly inflated on one side, so I add an edge loop with a limit where the limit will be. I select all the vertices from one side, I place the pivot on the limit edge, so remember D to edit the pivot, and I then scale it to have a result like this. The eye itself is the same but slightly inwards. So it's important to note that the part where it goes inwards is the colored part of the eye. To be able to scale inwards and not flatten it, you need to double click on the scale icon and unclick prevent negative scale. So the pupil in the eye is a hole. So we do a bit the same. To make the pupil, we make a hole, we extrude inwards to have a little bit of thickness, and we close the eye, because remember, every mesh needs to be closed. And the pupil itself is just a flat cylinder that will have a pure black color in it, and you put it right behind the hole. So normally for a human eye this is finished, this is done, but I personally added another mesh inside the eye, between the eye and the cornea, because I plan to assign a kind of translucent shader to it. But again, this is only to achieve the result I want. Human eyes don't have this. So it's super important to not move or rotate your eye meshes itself. They need to have a 0 value on everything. So this is important for the rigging and animation process. So to prevent that, just group everything together, and you can only move or rotate the group itself, so that the group has the transform values and not the meshes. Once placed, I put that group in another group, which will have its pivot point in the middle of the scene. I just duplicate it and then apply a -1 value on the white scale axis to mirror it. So I just quickly assigned shaders to the eye to test if it works well, but I will redo and explain this more in the next video where we will do the textures. So now that the body is finished, I put everything inside the group and I start to make the clothes. So now I start making all the little props. So the boot, as well as all the other clothing pieces, won't have any thickness. This is best if you want to animate it later on or wig it. Generally, they make the wig without the thickness and then extrude it to have thickness at the end, and they just copy the skin weights onto the new version. So by just extruding it at the end, the UVs will remain the same, like the other side will have the same texture. There will just be the thin thickness poly loop that won't have good UVs, but if your cloth is thin, it won't bother. And if your cloth is really thick, maybe you just add the thickness right from the start. You just need to think about what you plan to do with it in the future. And even if I personally want to wig or animate it, a cloth without thickness will be much more easier to modify for the final pose. I will just extrude it at the end for the final render. So as you can see, I decided to delete the foot. You can do this if you know that the character will never be seen with his shoes off, and you just need to be sure that you can't see it, that they are missing. Just remember to close the holes. To duplicate faces like I did with the soul, just select the faces you want, go to Mesh and hit Duplicate. A really cool feature to inflate your mesh is when you select all your vertices, you can hold down Ctrl and middle mouse and then go up or down with your mouse, and it will push the vertices along their normals. So it's like an inflate effect. I made one side of the cape go on top of the other side, like a real cape will. So this wasn't in the concept, but it adds more realism. It's important to sometimes add or modify things when you adapt a concept, because well, concept artists may not always draw everything as it is supposed to be. It's not to blame them, it's just normal because they often use shortcuts in order to have a more nice looking result in 2D. But as we are in 3D, we can't always cheat, and so we need to adapt. Now I needed to attach the two parts. Just think of a cape like in real life. Actually, it's just a rectangle and it's tighter around the neck. So the topology should also be like a grid, and even if your topology is really ugly during the attaching process, it doesn't matter, you just have to trust the process. At the end, I will smooth it out and the topology nicely adapts and becomes nice. I nearly finished everything, so exported it back in ZBrush. I chose to make the stuff in ZBrush because I know it goes faster for this kind of shape. Again, I use the bend curve tool on the cylinder to quickly have the shape I want. Once the shape is right, I zero mesh it to have a nice and clean topology. So that's it guys for the first part of the tutorial. For now we have this nice and smooth mesh, but you can see it doesn't have bows or has any details on it. So we will do that on the next video. So in the next video we will do all the sculpting process in ZBrush. We will do UVs, we will export the displacement maps, and we will set the bows inside of ZBrush. So I hope you enjoyed it, and see you in the next video.